The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 172. Looking for improvement? The Wolverines ready themselves for the Battle of the Little Brown Jug this Saturday with the Golden Gophers.
Oh man, Euchre's been broadcasting for 27 years. I have never seen anything like this. They need 2 inches. Dennis Franklin, the quarterback, taking a long con from center. He hands off to Shuttlesworth 5, and it's down to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Dennis Franklin! Oh my God, Dennis Franklin fooled everybody. He fooled me. He fooled the entire Ohio State team. Kneeling is Larry Gustafson. Attempting will be Super Toe. Super Toe will kick the 30-yard field goal. It's good to send over there. It's a tied-up ball game. 10-10. Okay. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Carter hands up. Look at those Wolverines. 95 Wolverines going to the end zone. Carter got the pass. In the air, it's done. Buford is going out of his mind. I have never seen anything like this in all my 40 years of covering Michigan football.
This is the Michigan Man Podcast. On GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. This Saturday, the Minnesota Golden Gophers visit the Big House in the battle for the Little Brown Jug. Minnesota is smarting following a 23-7 homecoming loss to Iowa last Saturday, and the Wolverines are antsy to get back on the field and show improvement. On our visitor segment today, our guest is Michael Grimm, the radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Gophers. Associate Editor Michael Spath from the Wolverine will join us later on our Michigan Gameday segment. First, a few of my thoughts on my view from Section 17. For the better part of 2 weeks, we've been talking about the mistakes. Devon's turnovers, poor line blocking, untimely penalties, receivers not running clean routes, etc., etc. Michigan has now had 2 weeks to clean it up and get ready for the Gophers. This is a young team, so I don't think any of us expect perfection. Improvement will suffice. So what I'd like to see this Saturday would be Devon taking better care of the football, better push from the offensive line, and making the power running game a point of emphasis, as Shemi Schembechler said on last week's show. In the receiving game, the guys need to start getting separation so Devon has some open receivers to throw to, at least every so often. I think this will probably require help from Jehu Chesson and maybe even freshman speedster Demario Jones. At Brady's Monday presser, he mentioned that we will probably see Demario Jones this weekend. In the running game, Fitz has been solid when there is a hole to run through, but I think by now we know he is not going to run over linebackers or even make many people miss with his moves. It's probably time to get Derek Green and some of the other young backs some carries, and again at Brady's Monday presser, he said he would like to get Green and Thomas Rawls and Devion Smith more carries early in the Minnesota game. From a defensive perspective, I'm not really worried too much about this team. I like the personnel, and I like it even better that Greg Madison is the coordinator. We all want more pressure from the D-line, and hopefully we start to see more of that this week. I just have a hunch that the defense is going to get better and better each week. Well, Coach Jerry Kill is in his 3rd season as the head man at Minnesota, and everyone in the conference considers him a solid coach and is impressed with the job he's done so far in his efforts to make the Golden Gophers competitive again. They got off to a great start, and then they got handled at home last week by Iowa in the Big Ten opener. Michael Grimm is the radio play-by-play voice of Minnesota football, and he joins us next on our visitor segment here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GVMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Back with us on our visitors segment this year is radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Gophers, Mike Grimm. Mike, great to have you back with us.
Thank you, Mike. Always enjoy being on with you.
Well, the Gophers started the season 4-0, Michael. Nice wins over UNLV, New Mexico State, Western Illinois, and San Jose State with that potent offense. Then Saturday lost the home opener with a big crowd there, 23-7 to the Hawkeyes. Were you surprised, Mike, that the Gophers couldn't get any offense going against the Hawkeyes?
Yes and no. I thought that the Gophers, even though their strength had been rushing the football, if you pay attention at all to what Iowa's done this year, they have not given much up on the ground. So I thought Minnesota might struggle. There were even times early in the season where the Gophers had struggled offensively to rush the football. So I wasn't surprised that the Hawkeyes were able to shut the run game down. I was maybe a little surprised that Minnesota didn't try a little more spread formation, spread the Hawkeyes out 5 wide. They've had trouble with that over the course of time recently, and the fact that Minnesota didn't do that was a bit surprising. They continued to kind of bang their head against the wall, trying to run the football. Almost got a little stubborn with it, in my opinion. But as it turns out, the Hawkeyes just literally shut them down. I think right now Michigan and Iowa are the only 2 teams in the country that haven't a lot of rushing touchdowns.
Well, Coach Kill's emphasis we read coming into the season, he said it a lot, was to develop that power running game. But the Gophers only managed 30 yards against the Hawkeyes on Saturday. The passing game made some strides in the second half, I thought, but that is really one aspect of the Minnesota attack that needs to improve to keep Big Ten defenses honest, doesn't it?
No question. You cannot win in this league or any league that plays at a high level like the Big Ten does and be one-dimensional. And unless you're like, Tom Osborne's, eye-bone offense that won some national titles, and Minnesota's not at that level. So you definitely need to be balanced if you're, a team like Minnesota trying to scrape its way into some contending situations at some point here in the future. So they have to be better at the passing game. And you're right, Mike. I thought they passed the times they tried to pass. They had some success, one with it, but two, some of their failures were bad throws. I mean, they had a couple of receivers open, and frankly, that's been an issue with the Minnesota offense, was receivers not getting open. Well, Saturday against Iowa, they had receivers open, but the quarterback, maybe a little rusty, Philip Nelson, had not played in a while with that hamstring injury, missed 4 or 5 open targets. And when you're in a game where you can't move the ball on the ground and you're kind of relying on the air, you've got to hit those strikes in league play, and that's something that certainly the coaches, I would think, would want to see this weekend in Ann Arbor.
Well, when Philip Nelson, Mike, started to throw in the second half, he seems to be looking for Derek Engel, who looks like a nice receiver. But the Gophers really haven't thrown that much this year until Saturday. Other than Engel, is there some potential help in that receiving core right now?
Well, they're going to have to hope so. Engel is a possession receiver. He's not a game breaker. They have a couple guys that I think if they turn them loose might have an opportunity to break some plays. Jamel Harbison doesn't have a catch this year. Now, he missed the first 2 games because he got in some trouble in the off season, and they needed to keep him out of those 2 as a punishment. And then he's been on the field, and they like his size. He's a stronger, faster receiver, but he just has not played much. I think they're still trying to work him in. So he wears number 16, so Wolverine fans can keep an eye for him. I think eventually that kid can make some plays and be a game-breaking type receiver. KJ May was non-existent. He wears number 1. He had some flashes early in the season, but as you said, any flashes have been limited because the Gophers just frankly didn't need to pass the ball much in the non-conference, and consequently didn't throw much. And I think consequently to that, looked like they needed some work. Maybe they should have worked on that passing game even in some of those blowouts in the non-conference to hone in some of the skills. But I think May, I think Harbison are 2 guys that if they want to get things going, they'll have to. And then Max Williams is a tight end that they absolutely need to get more involved. He's had 5 catches this year. 3 have been absolute spectacular, highlight reel type catches. So that's a redshirt freshman as a tight end that they've got to get more active in the pass game.
After 5 games, the coaching staff pretty much knows what they have from a personnel standpoint. Do you think right now Coach Kill has what he needs to diversify the offensive scheme as the season progresses? and maybe get better balance in that run-pass game?
Well, you know what? Even if he doesn't, I think they've got to. They've got. They can't be so stubborn that they're just going to keep handing the ball off. Michigan's rush defense is pretty good as well, and even if they have to, remind themselves with whatever it is they need to do, they're going to have to work on the passing game. So yeah, I think whether they like it or not, they're going to have to. They're going to have to try to incorporate all those guys in and involve the passing game a little bit more as the Big Ten season moves on. They're at 4 wins. Obviously, they want to get back to a bowl game as they did a year ago, and that means they've got to find, a minimum 2 wins. I mean, obviously, any Gopher fan would say they'd love to, win the rest or win 4 or win whatever. But you could look at that schedule that Minnesota has left, and the Big Ten did them no favors, and you could make an argument they won't be favored in one Big Ten game. So they're going to have to pull a surprise someplace twice to get back to bowl eligibility. So I think whether they like it or not, they're going to have to incorporate that pass game.
Well, Mike, over on the D, the Gophers have a couple of good linebackers in Aaron Hill and Devondre Campbell. Is this defense better than last year's?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think the team, Mike, in general is better. I think they're better in every facet of the game, not by a lot. I don't think they're elite at anything. In other words, I don't think they have elite secondary player, receiver player, quarterback player, running back player, any facet of the game. But I think they're better at each individual. Their secondary's better, linebacking's better, defensive line's better, offensive line is better, quarterback has been a little better, and receiver play's been a little better. Tight ends have been better, so running backs have been better. So, but the problem they've got is the record may not be better. When you look at the 2 Big Ten wins they got last year, they came against Illinois and Purdue. Neither team is on this year's schedule, so they traded those guys out and added Penn State, which is going to be a tough home game, and a road game at Indiana. Now that's a game that you might look like, hey, that's a chance to go get one, but we know Indiana at home is good. Indiana seems to be a program that fancies itself on the rise as well, so they're going to be looking at it, and they're going to be needing all the wins they can get. So when a team like Minnesota shows up in Bloomington, they're going to think they've got to get that one. So that's certainly no gimme, no picnic there. So I think they're better at every facet, but I'm not sure that means the record at the end of the year will be better than it was a year ago.
Mike, do you think this is a pivotal year for Coach Jerry Kill, or is he going to get more time to stock the shelves with more talent there?
Yeah, no danger in him not staying here. I think it's an important year. Yes, I mean, if they end up not winning another game and end up with 4 wins and 8 losses, I mean that sours people when you lose what would be 8 games, your last 8 games. So you got to hope that doesn't happen. But even if it does, he's not going to be dismissed. He signed a 7-year deal when he got here. The president likes the job he's done. The academic situation was a mess when he walked in, and they've cleaned that up to the point where they're one of the top handful of programs academically in the country in a matter of 2 years. They turned that thing around overnight and started holding kids accountable. So all, the people that would make decisions on his future all are in his corner. And even if they would go 4-8, that's the worst case scenario. I think he's good, which I then in turn think would make next year 4, a pivotal year, and I think that is the key season. Now, if he ends up having some success here and pulls off a few upsets and wins 2 or 3 of the final handful of games here, excuse me, then I think obviously that solidifies his standing, and you try to move forward and take that next step up. But I think he's safe. I think he's safe no matter what happens this year, and then that would, I think, put some pressure on him next year.
Are the health concerns a big issue? It seems that's a pretty scary situation, as you see, with Coach Kill having the seizures. Is there much talk about that?
Well, there is, amongst some people. Again, I think the key decision makers involved, it's not a big deal. The president of the university, the athletic director of the university, I don't think it's a big deal to either one of those guys. It's going to take some educating. Now, look, if Jerry Kill, misses 6 of the last 8 games because of, having seizures, then I think obviously it becomes an issue. Right now, he's at about 1 a year. He's missed, part of a game each year. One of those games was the last play. It was right before the last play, so it was not even it really didn't have an impact on the outcome of the game. The game had been decided by that point. and so I think here we know he has epilepsy, so we know that. We know he's going to have seizures, and then the question is, can he fulfill his job duties? And I think the way people are trying to get educated here from the university is trying to tell, portray it. Look, there's 3 million people that have epilepsy. Many of them have seizures. Many of them lead their lives in a normal fashion, recovering from seizures. And in Jerry Kill's case, his assistants have all been with him for a long time. They know the routine, and they don't miss much of a beat. The players are aware of it. In fact, I'd say they get stronger when they see it happen. So, I don't think it's an issue. They're not life-threatening. The life-threatening part would be if he would fall, if he'd happen to have one while he's on a flight of stairs or something, and you could injure yourself. But the doctors continue to say that when he has a seizure, they obviously check his vitals immediately, and they always are strong. He wakes up from them sore and stiff and a little slow going, but he recovers, and he's at work the next day almost all the time. So I don't think, frankly, he's in pretty good health. He's kept himself in good shape outside of the uncomfortable nature of having to watch the seizure itself. Not to downplay it, but it's almost like someone who might have a migraine headache and miss a day of work. They're back the next day. They know they've been through the rigors, but there was nothing life-threatening about it. And that's kind of the way, people that have been around epilepsy say that you have to handle it.
Our guest on our visitors segment today is the radio play-by-play voice of the Golden Gophers, Mike Grimm. Mike, the opening line on the game Saturday is Michigan by just over 20 points. Given the way Michigan has played to Michigan fans, that seems like an awful lot. Do you look for the Gophers to come out throwing the ball early in this game? Because we talked about how Saturday against Iowa, it seemed like the offense sort of beat its head against the wall. Then in the second half, opened it up a little bit. And I know Philip Nelson, as you said, missed some open receivers, but the offense seemed to move forward doing that. Do you think they're going to use that kind of an attack, come out and throw a bit earlier?
Well, I think they may go to the pass game early. I don't think there's any doubt they'll test the waters to see, what the running game is going to give them. I mean, I think you'll see them come out running early, and if there's a couple of 3-and-outs, then they'll shift into some pass mode. But it's been this coaching staff's MO to absolutely, bludgeon the running game, find out if you can move the line of scrimmage, and if you can, they're going to stick with it, and spice in here and there a few passing plays. But if they get shut down, I don't think there's any doubt they're going to have to move to the passing game sooner, a more consistent passing game sooner than they did against Iowa last week.
Well, the Michigan offense, as we've all seen, has been dynamic, and it's been a disaster at times through the first 4 games. What are the defensive keys that you see for Minnesota this week in defending against Devin Gardner and this offense?
Well, I think first of all, just a general mindset basis. If Minnesota has any chance to pull off the stunner in Ann Arbor, they're literally going to have to believe that they can do it. So I think Jerry Kill will have a somewhat of a sales job to do on his team, whether it's offense or defense. And I think that part of it likely will come from, hey, look. This Minnesota team is probably better than Akron and probably better than UConn, and both those teams took Michigan, down to the wire, close to it. And so if those two teams can do it, then you've got to believe you can do it. That would be the sales job he's going to probably do this week. And then from there, defensively, I think the big play is what killed Minnesota last year in the matchup against Devin Gardner. Remember, that was Gardner's kind of first game. We were playing it right up to kickoff as to whether Robinson was going to play, and he was out there warming up, but ended up not playing. And Gardner struggled early, and then through the long pass, I believe, to Dillio, where he got behind the D on a broken play. And from that point on, Gardner had a fabulous game, and then really kind of vaulted him into the rest of the year. And so I think they need to avoid that kind of stuff with a big play. They need to, keep things in front of them. Give up 6 yards or 5 yards as opposed to give up 35 or 65 yards. Make tackles when you can. Don't miss tackles and kind of move from there. But I think they really need to avoid, the big play Michigan offense.
This past weekend with Michigan having the bye week, I had a chance to sit and watch the entire Minnesota-Iowa game, and I was sort of thinking to myself, I know it was a deflating loss for Minnesota. There was a big crowd. It was homecoming. But looking back on that game and then looking forward for Minnesota, Do you think maybe the fact there was that Iowa's a much better team than maybe everyone anticipated?
Well, I think part of it is I think people in this rivalry with Iowa and Minnesota, neither side wants to give the other side too much credit. So, I've been on both sides of it. I grew up in the state of Iowa, and then have over here in Minnesota since 2006 with the Gopher Radio Network. So I kind of have a grasp on it, and so my acquaintances in Iowa, to me, seem to be overconfident. They were predicting 2 touchdown wins, and people that I know here that follow the program were thinking that Iowa wasn't any good. So it looks like, at least after last week, that the folks in Iowa had a better read on their team than the folks in Minnesota did. And I don't think there's any doubt that after that opening loss to Northern Illinois, in which Iowa really handed them the game. I mean, that game was tied, and Iowa had it heading into field goal position when the kid threw an interception, and they returned it and got the game-winning kick. So, Iowa had that game look like maybe they were on their way to having a last-second field goal opportunity, and then the table turned quickly in that one. And so, yeah, I think Iowa's better than people thought. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think, I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but I think they will have some say in it. They'll upset somebody, or they may be in the fight. Kirk Ferentz, this is his kind of year. Usually when people have him written off or think they're an under-the-radar team is when they kind of strike up. Their 2009 Orange Bowl season, no one really had them pegged much, and all of a sudden you're looking and it's week 9 and they're 9-0, and you're going, how the heck did that happen? They didn't blow anybody out. I'm not suggesting this team this time around is going to do that. But I do think that this is the kind of year that those folks in Iowa like. And so, yeah, I think they'll have they're better, yes, and I think they'll have a say one way, shape, or form who wins this division.
I think you're right about that. What's the injury situation for the Gophers like heading into Saturday, Mike?
Well, there was nothing too much new, over the weekend, from the post-game stuff on Sunday and into the week. I think Philip Nelson will start this game. He had the hamstring and missed the San Jose State game. Mitch Leitner's the backup quarterback. That was probably the other surprise, Mike, was that we didn't see Leitner, who was the reigning Big Ten Freshman of the Week after his record-setting performance. Nelson didn't exactly set the world on fire, and I thought, with the offense kind of, not doing that well, I thought they might just send the kid back in there to see what he could bring, whether it's new life or a new look or what have you, and they just wouldn't do it. So I don't know whether we'll see him in the big house or not, but I think Nelson will for sure get the start at quarterback. But I think it should be a relatively healthy Minnesota team coming into the state of Michigan.
Just a question on Leitner. Has he got a pretty good arm?
You know what? It's an interesting thing, and I'm not sure. I do sneak out to a practice or two. He's got a cannon. It's a little erratic, but he was recruited mostly as a drop-back pocket passer with the thought that he might get moved to tight end at some point because he's a big kid. He's 6'4", 240. And they were impressed enough with his passing to say, no, we're going to keep him at quarterback here at least for the time being and see where it takes him. Yet last week, after the game, the loss to Iowa, when asked about it, Jerry Kill flat out said, no, Nelson's the better passer of the two. I think Leitner can throw. I wouldn't mind seeing him get a shot just to whip the ball around the field a little bit with that strong arm and see what he's got. But the coaching staff certainly believes Nelson is the better passer.
Well, heading into this Saturday, both teams have a lot of questions and they have a lot to prove. It really is a big game for both teams, isn't it, Mike?
It is. I mean, the Gophers have started, years out like this, even back with Glenn Mason as coach, where they're 4-0, and then the trapdoor kind of falls down, opens up on these Gopher fans, and they've been through it. So it's if there's going to be any more buy-in on this team, then this weekend is a big one. They got to avoid a blowout. If the Gophers go in and get blown out, then the bandwagon's going to empty quick. If they can go in and keep it close, if somehow they would manage to stun the Wolverines there, then obviously the buyback is in, and all of a sudden this team is back in play as someone that you have to take seriously each week. But if I wouldn't predict 58-0 the last visit. That probably won't happen. But even if it's a 42-10 15 game or something like that, things are going to get pretty dark here in the Twin Cities from a Gopher football perspective.
Our guest on the show today has been the radio play-by-play voice of the Gophers, Mike Grimm. Mike, it was great to have you back on this year. We look forward to getting you back on next year.
Sounds good. I always look forward to coming up to Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thanks again to Minnesota radio play-by-play voice Michael Grimm for being our guest today on our visitor segment. Coming up next, our guest is Michael Spath, the associate editor at the Wolverine, on our Michigan Game Day segment. Here on the Michigan Man podcast on GVMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. Back with us on our Michigan Game Day segment as we get ready for Minnesota this Saturday at the Big House. Michael Spath, associate editor of the Wolverine. Great to have you back, Michael.
Great to be back, Mike. I've really enjoyed your show. I think you do a fantastic job with it, and I'm glad I can be a guest this week.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And we're just coming off the bye week, of course. We all had a chance to sit around and watch a lot of football other than Michigan over the weekend, so that was interesting. With the bye week, though, really 2 weeks, there was plenty to work on. We all know that. Coach Hoke and Coach Borges said they thought most of the mistakes we've been seeing so far through the first 4 games were fixable. So let's talk about some of those mistakes, Michael, and see, do we think they really can be fixed? And let's start with Devin and his turnovers. We've been hearing all about that for the last couple of weeks. In 2 weeks, do you think that's something that the coaching staff, mainly Coach Borges, can get fixed?
For me, it comes back. I know we're going to talk about the offensive line, I'm assuming, but for me, it honestly comes back to the offensive line and whether or not they can establish a running game with traditional tailbacks. Because I think right now what you have is you have a quarterback that just thinks, I have to carry this team, I have to put them on my back, and he tries to make too many plays that aren't there instead of being a little bit smarter and making the decisions that are you can still make a risk, but it's a risk that favors you. If it's not going to be completed, it's going to be an incomplete pass. And I think until that changes, there's nothing that can take place in 2 weeks or in 2 months that is going to convince him. I mean, let's face it, the coaches are not going up to Devin Gardner and saying, hey, Devin, do us a favor and throw the ball into traffic a lot. Or when you're in trouble, just throw the ball up in the air and see what comes down with it. They've been drilling this into him for months now. You got to take care of the football. You got to make smart decisions. Instead of taking a 14-yard sack, when you roll out, throw the ball away. Or when you're going to throw the ball away, don't throw it into the crowd. Don't throw it up for grabs. Those kind of things have been there for the get-go. So I don't think in 2 weeks' time that's going to change. I think what's going to happen is the running game has to come along to the point where Devin just realizes, hey, this isn't all on my shoulders. If that took place over last week and this week, then I think we could see an improvement in Devin Gardner's decision-making. But if it didn't, then I think we're going to experience a little bit of the same thing we've been doing, is that he's just a little too reckless with the football because he's just trying to make too many plays on his own.
Well, I think we've all seen that through the first 4 weeks, and a lot of it, as you just mentioned, goes back to that offensive line. So, looking at the offensive line coming out of the bye week, do you roll with Glasgow and Kalis and Miller at center, or do you think, and you hate to do tinkering at this time of the year, especially at center, but do you think we're going to see some of that come Saturday?
I honestly do not know how they can keep the same starting 5 together. It's the old fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. I got that wrong. Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. My dad would be so disappointed in me right now that I got that old cliche wrong. But you know what? If there was some promise, if there was something we had seen in these 4 games that they've been getting progressively better, maybe not overwhelming, but they've been getting a little bit better each game, I would say, you know what? Keep them together. They're getting better slowly, and they can work this thing out. But what we've seen instead is we've seen regression the last couple of weeks. Akron game was obviously a poor performance. The UConn game, was another bad effort from the offensive line. I don't know how you can go into the Big Ten campaign and think that this starting five is going to be good enough to go 6-2 or 7-1 and give you a shot to play for the championship. Good guys, really good guys. Jack Miller is a young man that we've had a chance to interview many times. He wants to be great. He's smart. He's a good worker. I mean, he's doing everything that he can possibly do to be the starting center in Michigan. But there's something that's just not right there. Whether it's the chemistry in the interior or they're not physical enough, something has to change. And so I would be shocked if come Saturday against Minnesota, we do not see a new starting lineup. They have to try something else because what's they have right now just isn't working well enough.
So the scenario you would think then would be if Miller is not going to play at center, a lot of people think that's the real issue there. You move Glasgow over to center and maybe Chris Bryant to left guard. That's maybe what we'll see.
I think that's the most likely scenario that unfolds in this situation. And I know that, one of the reasons they really like Jack Miller is because he's a smart guy, because he gets them in the right play, notices things on the defense and can move guys around. And maybe you lose a little bit of that with Glasgow, but what you gain is a more physical player. I mean, you're talking about a difference in about 20 pounds between the two. From what we hear, a guy that Glasgow is just in the weight room is stronger, can do a lot of the cleans and all those different things, that the squats just at a different level than Jack Miller can. And and I don't know. I mean, that's the balance there. Is do you give up something mentally for something physically, and what's more important? And while normally you would say, well, you got to have the smart center in there. I mean, you look down the list of guys that played center at Michigan, and Dave Pearson is a name that stands out to me, and Adam Krause and Kurt Anderson. And these were not physically impressive, overwhelming players. They're really smart guys that got the job done. And maybe if Jack Miller had a more dominant left guard and a more dominant right guard next to him, he'd be able to get by. But at this point, physically, he's just not producing at the level that they need to. And that's why, I think Glasgow comes in at center. Chris Bryant, who they've mentioned many times as a mauling type. He's supposedly healthy now. He's had some injuries that have held him back. Put him at left guard, and let's see what that starting five can do. And if it doesn't work, Mike, then we've got a real problem, because then we have a starting four that is our starting five from the first four games that isn't good enough, and now we have a new starting five that isn't good enough. Then they've got a real issue on their hands. So let's just, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they make a couple changes and it all comes together for them.
Well, because of all of the things we've been talking about in the interior of that offensive line, the running game has struggled for consistency. Fitz has been okay, but I think we know after watching Fitz this long, he's not a guy that's going to run through linebackers. He can't make people miss consistently. So heading into the Big Ten season, do you think we're going to start seeing more of a Derek Green, who is that kind of a guy who can make people miss, we think, but he definitely squares those shoulders and can pop a linebacker?
People have been asking me that question, and I think if there was a bigger role for Derek Green, I think we would have seen it. I think what we are seeing is a lot of what we've seen out of Fred Jackson, the running backs coach, in the past, and that's when the going gets tough, he kind of locks in on one guy, and he just feels really comfortable with one player. And until Michigan gets a big enough lead on someone that they feel comfortable, I don't know that we're going to see Derek Green in the first quarter or the first half against Minnesota or the first half against Penn State. I think he needs to get a better feel for him, later in a game when hopefully Michigan is winning by a good margin. I mean, I think there is an element that Derek Green could add, and that play a more physical power game. But I mean, you've been around this program long enough. You've seen the way that Fred Jackson operates, and I just don't know that that's the way that he's gonna think about it. He knows in Fitz Tucson, he's a guy that like you said, maybe he's not going to run over people, but if you give him a hole, he's going to make something of it. He's a guy that has good hands, can catch the ball in the backfield, and even though he's not blocking great, he is someone that you can trust usually in that blocking situation. So I would honestly be surprised if we see Derek Green's role expand without Michigan getting a comfortable lead on someone where we can see him in a more carefree kind of role where he doesn't have to play a critical position early in a game.
Well, Michael, do you think Derek Green's weight issue coming into camp has slowed him down, or just understanding the college game? What do you think is holding him back?
I think that's a good question because Freddie J was really high on him. I think the ankle injury that started off in camp kind of limited his opportunity in preseason practice, and I think the weight issue, so robbed him a little bit of explosiveness, and just those two factors combined. And then with the way that the games have been really close so far and needing to, know that you have a senior that you can count on, I think those three factors all kind of contributed to him not getting a good run at this moment. And maybe if he's, we've heard he's in better shape. We've heard he's lost about 10 pounds down to about 230. His ankle is supposedly 100%. So, maybe he could. If he goes in there and his first carry he gets, 10 yards or runs into a linebacker and knocks him on his back, then I think we could see a little bit more of him. But at the moment, I just know how Fred Jackson operates, and it seems like he's got one guy he trusts, and that's just who he's going to ride for as long as he can until he starts feeling slightly more comfortable with somebody else.
Now, that is my hunch, too. Let's talk about the receiving game as part of our fixable list of items here, Michael. We know what we're going to get from Gallen and Dillio, but we're not getting much separation or any in the passing game from our receivers right now. There doesn't seem to be an over-the-top threat. It might be Jehu Chesson, but when you look at our core of receivers, what can they do right now, short of maybe sticking Devin Funchess out in the slot, letting him go deep every so often? How fixable is that?
Well, that's a good question. When you can't create separation on your own, what you have to rely on is you have to rely on play action, play fakes. Running some routes like crossing routes that there's a lot of people in traffic, and you kind of hope that you kind of pick people off. And I think the most disappointing thing to me about this season so far in terms of the wide receivers is the deep ball. I mean, Jehu Chesson is a guy that has great speed, but they have not been able to connect down the field. They really have not. I mean, you look at their longest passing plays, and most of them are. I mean, Jeremy Gallen had about a 20-yard completion that he turned into a 61-yard touchdown against Notre Dame with some guys missing some tackles and a great block by Jehu Chesson. Devin Funchess against Akron had a 48-yard touchdown, but it was an 8-yard route that he made a couple guys miss. And then Jehu Chesson had a 33-yard touchdown that, again, it was a shorter route that he made a couple guys miss. They have not been able to get down the field, and I think that speaks to the fact that at the line of scrimmage, those wide receivers, Joe Reynolds and Jeremy Jackson and Jehu Chesson are getting jammed, and then just not being able to get downfield fast enough to create those opportunities. And the best thing that Michigan can have happen for those young guys is a better running game, because if you have the running game and now you do the play action, well, now the linebackers, they're not dropping quick enough. The safeties are keeping their eyes on the backfield a little bit longer, and you can catch a cornerback, look over, real quickly just to see what's happening there. And when that happens, you free up a lot of your receivers to have a little bit more separation. And without that happening, Mike, I don't think that we see a dramatic change because I just don't think that Jehu is physical enough yet at this stage in his career, and it's maybe not until next year when Amaro Darbo comes back, and and I know people are looking forward to that, but then you lose Jeremy Gallen and Drew Dillio. So I think it's going to be a couple years. You look at the recruits that they have at the receiver position, and there are some studs that are coming in, but they're not here right now, and they're going to be true freshmen next year and true freshmen the year after that. So it's going to take a little bit of time for this receiving corps to get to the Michigan standard.
Our guest here on our Michigan Game Day segment is Michael Spath, the associate editor of the Wolverine. Michael, let's talk about the defense. The one thing we heard from spring through summer into the fall was that Coach Madison wanted to generate more pressure without blitzing as much as he has in the past. Still likes to blitz, but let's get more pressure from the guys up front. We saw improvement against UConn, but that was UConn. After 4 games, doesn't it look like we maybe just don't have a true pass rusher or a couple of those in this group?
Well, they do, and his name is Jake Ryan, and he can't come back soon enough.
Well, yeah.
I agree. I'm disappointed. I thought, I think the pass rush has been disappointing. That a guy like Frank Clark that we heard so much about all offseason, the hype about this kid, that He's unblockable. You put him in a one-on-one situation, and he's going to get to the quarterback every time. And, he had 2 sacks against UConn, and you hope that maybe that was his breakthrough performance. But you know what we saw last year in November? He had a really nice November. He played extremely well against Northwestern and Ohio State, and then he was absent in the bowl game. So here's a guy that throughout his career has been really inconsistent. And I would say beyond inconsistent, he's had maybe one good game and 2 or 3 clunkers, and then another good game. And that's just, I'm sorry, but that's just not good enough at this level. You can't be a guy that disappears for 2 or 3 games in a row. And is it going to be Mario Ojemudia? Well, we haven't really seen Mario Ojemudia, perform and get the job done. Is it going to be Jabril Black? None of these guys have really proven themselves in the first 4 games, and I think that is terribly disappointing because of how high the expectations were for that group. The one thing is this past game, Greg Madison said that maybe I was making them think too much, and I just kind of turned them loose. Well, that's great, and it's terrific to turn these guys loose on 3rd down, but on other downs, you do have to think a little bit. You have to remain disciplined. You look at the first couple of games, and there'd be terrific pressure coming up the middle, whether it was Quentin Washington or Willie Henry or Jabril Black. Well, then Frank Clark and the other defensive end, if it was Keith Heitzman or Matthew Godin or sometimes Mario Ojemudia, they would lose their containment, and so all of a sudden the quarterback would just be able to step outside. Well, if you're telling these guys, just go get the quarterback, just, pin your ears back and just rush the passer, well, then you lose something, that mental side of the containment that you need. And I don't think there's a perfect solution. I think some of these guys have to raise their game, and I think, the one thing that'll help Michigan tremendously is when Jake Ryan comes back, you have a guy that you can put in situations that is going to get to the quarterback. If you put him at the Sam linebacker, maybe you can take Brennan Byer, who's been the most consistent pass rusher so far. Maybe you can move him to weak side end, give Frank Clark some competition, and let him get after the quarterback. Because right now, the dynamic that they have is just kind of like the offensive line. There's some good talent there, and maybe down the road, but right now it's just not getting the job done consistently.
Over the past weekend, Michael, one of the things that was nice, I think you and I both agree with this, is we got to watch a lot of other teams play other than Michigan. And we're so preoccupied with, are we not getting pressure? Why aren't we getting pressure? And answering all the Michigan questions that I thought it was interesting yesterday or Saturday on ABC, John Saunders and Jesse Palmer, during one of the intermissions, John Saunders brought up an interesting point that made me think. He said, one thing we're hearing an awful lot from defensive coordinators and coaches all over the country is we're not generating enough pressure without the blitz up front. We're not getting pressure in the quarterback. And Jesse Palmer said, well, you know what? As an ex-quarterback, I'll tell you why I think that is a factor. He said a lot of these offenses know that they're up against big, strong fronts. And he said, from the time you start playing the defensive line, it's 1, 2, 3. That's how long you have to get to the quarterback. And he said a lot of these spread offenses are specifically designed to not give you that 3 seconds. They're going to get rid of the ball. So I think, I thought about that, and other than Connecticut, that's basically the kind of offensive attacks we've seen so far this year, and we won't see as much in the Big Ten, but that is something to think about. That's pretty valid.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree. If you look at the Notre Dame game, there's a couple elements. You've got max protection. You've got offensive lines that are keeping a tight end or a fullback or running back for using 6 to 7 guys to block 4 on a regular basis, and limiting their limiting how many people are going out into receiver routes. And then Tommy Rees, when I went back and looked at that game film, I think he maybe took a 5-step drop on 3 of his 40-something passes and a 7-step drop like twice. These are not the long developing routes. They're a lot of short, quick hitters that you're hoping can turn into bigger plays. And the same thing with Akron. Connecticut a little bit less. They did a few more 5-step drops, but most of the time it's 1, 2, 3, get rid of the ball. And so I think that it has been a change in offenses, and the only way that you're going to get there, I watched that Georgia LSU game yesterday, which was a fantastic game. Mm-hmm. And, unless a defensive tackle burst through the middle of the line of scrimmage very quickly, or a linebacker came on a blitz, most of the time those two teams didn't even get to the quarterback, and those are some fantastic defenses. So I think there's a lot of truth to that, and maybe we should be changing our expectations somewhat. I think the key to getting a better pass rush now is to have better coverage in the secondary, because the longer you tie those guys up, the more opportunity your front four has to get to the quarterback. But if you're going to do that, and Michigan has some good cornerbacks, and Blake Countess is really playing well, if you're going to occupy those guys for 4 or 5 seconds, well, then you have to get to the quarterback. I mean, 5 seconds is an eternity in college football nowadays. And I think the problem is that even in those situations where there's good coverage downfield, Michigan still isn't getting to the quarterback, and that's the big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael, let's look forward to the Minnesota game coming up this Saturday. I had a chance to watch Minnesota play Iowa on Saturday. I was pretty impressed with Iowa, actually. But the Golden Gophers rolled through their first 4 games: UNLV, New Mexico State, Western Illinois, and they did a nice job against what was thought to be a pretty decent San Jose State team, especially on the offense. But Saturday, they got handled by Iowa at home. So on paper, the Gophers look like, the perfect team for all that ails Michigan coming out of the bye week.
I would agree, and I would say the one thing that really stood out to me about the Iowa-Minnesota game was just how physical Iowa's offensive and defensive lines were. I was starting to think that maybe this Minnesota team had turned a corner and would be someone to watch, could be an 8-4 team this year, but I think what we saw is the difference in physical talent up front. No offense to their 4 opponents before that, but no one can really match Iowa for that type of physicality and toughness. And so they beat up the Minnesota offensive line. They beat up the defensive line, moved those guys around, and I think that's when you're running a read option with Philip Nelson, and no offense to Philip Nelson, but he's not Denard Robinson. And he's not an elite athlete. He's a good runner, but he's not going to. If there's not a hole there, he's not going to make the one guy miss and then burst through with the acceleration of a roadster. I mean, so I think this is a really good opportunity for Michigan to, as you said, to cure what ails them and to establish a better running game, to try a new offensive line, to get to the quarterback a little bit more. And maybe they don't have 5 sacks this weekend, but if they keep that running game in check, that'll be a win for the defense. So, a week ago, I was looking at this game and going, geez, this could be a 28-21 kind of game for Michigan. And now after watching Minnesota and Michigan having the bye and hopefully correcting some things, I would say if Michigan doesn't win this game by 2 touchdowns, I think that's going to be, another bad sign in probably a month full of them. So they've got an opportunity to get things on the right track, and hopefully they will.
Yeah, watching this Minnesota team, this is I would think, I'm not a defensive coordinator, but if I was, I would think, hey, this is a game planner's dream. This is a one-dimensional team. David Cobb, Donnell Kirkwood, they're good-looking backs. And Philip Nelson, who I really like, I think he's got a really nice arm, but he really doesn't have any receivers. This is a game, as far as game planning for Minnesota, that if you take away this running game, to me, it looks like we're going to cause all kinds of problems for them.
Yeah, I would agree completely, and I think that's what Iowa did yesterday. I mean, they did a really nice job on the read option with their discipline. I mean, that's the key to stopping that is you have one man that you need to get a linebacker or a defensive end that is isolated on the running back, and you need another guy that's isolated on the quarterback, and then you need to make those tackles in the open field, and that's what Iowa did really well. Their linebacker play yesterday was impressive. Anthony Hitchens, James Morris, I thought those guys really came to play and kind of showed that down the road, Iowa's going to be a much more formidable opponent than we expected them to be. But if Michigan can do that, and they have some good linebackers, if you look at the defensive side of the ball, the one spot that has played pretty well with Brennan Byer at strong side and Desmond Morgan in the middle and James Ross and Joe Bolden alternating at the weak side, I think those guys have been the biggest strength of the Michigan defense so far. And I like Michigan's chances to really kind of, take it to Minnesota's running game this week. And then we'll just have to see if Devin Gardner and the offensive line can do what they've, what we talked about earlier, what they've been trying to improve on this past week and run the football and improve their decision making. And if that happens, Michigan wins this game like 35-14 or so.
I think we have to hope that, because after watching Minnesota on Saturday, I would think it's another measuring stick game in a season full of measuring stick games so far. But to me, you've had 2 weeks to work out your kinks. This is clearly a team that is mismatched talent-wise. Psychologically, I think if Michigan doesn't come out and roll these guys, that could start some issues.
Yeah, they need a confidence booster at some point. I mean, they thought they were going to get it against Connecticut. Here they were talking about how embarrassed they were against Akron, and you thought they were going to come out and just absolutely take it to the Huskies, and then it turned out to be a much tighter game. So they need some confidence because they got to go on the road to Penn State, and even though Penn State is maybe not an elite program, it's still going to be a tough venue, and then they come back against Indiana. I mean, these next three games, they need to win all three, obviously, and they need to really kind of establish their ground game, their offensive line. They need to correct all their mistakes and get rolling, because when they hit November, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, now Iowa, and Ohio State, that's going to be a very tough stretch. And if this is a team that's still kind of still trying to find itself and not playing very well, then they're not going to do very well in that November stretch.
Well, just a final thought then, Michael. Both of us have been watching Michigan football for a long time, and I think, when you head into October, when the Big Ten season starts, we all usually have a pretty good idea, pretty good feel for where this team is. Maybe you see it differently, but right now, when I think ahead to the Big Ten season, Minnesota coming up on Saturday, I am in a position where I really don't know what to expect from this team.
I think we're all there. We can all. I expected them to beat Akron. I had them winning 63-0, and then that game was a 4-point game, and then I thought, okay, you know what? They're ticked off. They're going to go into UConn and pound these guys. I had them winning by, I think 4 touchdowns, and we didn't see it. So while I can sit here and say, hey, that they could win this game 35-14, it could be 24-21 for all we know, because this team has not established itself physically, emotionally, mentally, and you're right. I mean, I think we're all kind of just wait and see at the moment, and in a perfect world, Michigan comes out and does exactly what we've talked about earlier, and that rolls them, and now you can start to say, like, okay, this is a team that's gaining some momentum. But until that happens, we're all kind of just sitting here waiting to see what happens, and it could be a close game. I really wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't think anybody after their games against Akron and Connecticut could sit there and say, well, if they only win by 4 or they only win by 7, or if they lose, that would be a shock to me. No, nothing's a shock at this point with this team.
I think you're right. We're going to learn a lot more, and this team has a lot to prove starting this Saturday. Our guest here on our Michigan Game Day segment today has been Michael Spath, Associate Editor of the Wolverine. As always, Michael, it's a pleasure, and we look forward to the next time.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks again to Associate Editor Michael Spath from the Wolverine for being our guest on Michigan Game Day this week. Coming up next, we close it out for another week with Wolverine Quick Hits here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits this week, at his Monday presser, Coach Hoke said the team is in good physical shape coming off the bye week. He also said there could be changes with the offensive line on Saturday, but would not go into any detail. Brady said he'd like to see Derek Green, Devion Smith, and Thomas Rawls start getting more carries, not to supplant Fitz, but to help him stay fresh. Brady also mentioned that freshman speedster Demario Jones might start seeing more action, as Michigan needs to be able to threaten over the top in the passing game. Jones and Jehu Chesson are the only 2 receivers that have that kind of blazing speed in the receiving corps. With the Big Ten season getting underway on Saturday, you'll need your daily fix of Michigan football. There is no better place to get it than right here at GBM Wolverine. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and become a member today. We have player profiles, recruiting news, our lively message board, plenty of chatter about the season, and the always popular Monday Night Live chat with all of our talented writers right here at GBM Wolverine. So don't delay. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and join today. Make sure you're in the Wolverine loop this season. Don't forget our show app is now available from a variety of sources. For Android users, we're in the Market Store at Amazon.com. For Apple devices, our app is available in the iTunes Store. Another great way to tune us in for free is with the TuneIn Radio app. You can also hear the show on Stitcher Radio On Demand. Download the free app today at www.stitcher.com. Our phone lines are open for your calls 24/7, and we would love to hear from you. Give us your thoughts on the season to date, the Minnesota game over the weekend, or anything else maize and blue. Call 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. You can also email your thoughts and opinions to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. Give us a shout anytime. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again to our guests this week, Minnesota radio play-by-play voice Michael Grimm and the associate editor of the Wolverine Magazine, Michael Spath. The battle for the Little Brown Jug is set to kick off this Saturday at 3:30 p.m., and the weatherman, at least right now, is calling for partly sunny skies and temps in the 60s, so it should be a beautiful day. We'll be right back here next week to recap the Minnesota game and get ready for a trip to Happy Valley for another primetime game against the still tough Penn State Nittany Lions. So don't forget to come back next week. Until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Think victory and hope for improvement this Saturday from this young Michigan team. And as always, until we meet again, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.